The transport ship touched down at Forward Base Talon just before sunset. Corporal Park Dae-hyun watched from the landing pad as the ramp lowered, his rifle slung over his shoulder. He expected supplies, maybe reinforcements. What he did not expect was to see Commander Vexus Thal, the massive Rakthian warrior who led the alien battalion, carrying a small bundle in his arms. The bundle moved. It had fur. Dae-hyun had been stationed at the base for 6 months now. He knew the Rakthians well enough. They stood over 8 feet tall, covered in thick fur that ranged from deep purple to black. Their faces were a strange mix of cat and wolf, with sharp teeth and eyes that glowed faintly in dim light. They were the fiercest soldiers in the Galactic Defense Coalition. They never laughed. They rarely spoke, and they definitely never brought children to a military outpost. But here was Vex Thal, descending the ramp with careful steps, holding what could only be his daughter. The little one's fur was matted and dirty. Her ears pressed flat against her head. Even from a distance, Dae-hyun could see she was miserable. "Emergency evacuation," Lieutenant Choi Min-ji explained, appearing beside Dae-hyun. The Rakthian homeworld's northern continent got hit by the Void Swarm. Non-combatants had to scatter to safe zones. Some of the warriors had no choice but to bring family to their postings. Dae-hyun nodded slowly. He watched Vex Thal disappear into the barracks, the little cub tucked against his chest. The commander's usual proud posture seemed different, tighter, worried. 3 days passed. Dae-hyun noticed the change in the Rakthian soldiers. They were distracted. Vex Thal especially. The commander barely ate in the mess hall. During briefings, his clawed hand would tap against the table, a nervous gesture Dae-hyun had never seen before. The cub, whose name Dae-hyun learned was Kira, wandered the base like a small ghost. She kept to the shadows, her golden eyes wide and frightened. Her fur stuck out in all directions, clumped and tangled. She scratched at her sides constantly, her small claws digging into the mats. On the 4th day, Dae-hyun found her in the rec room. It was late evening, and most soldiers were either on patrol or sleeping. Kira sat in a corner, trying to bite at a particularly bad tangle near her shoulder. She whimpered softly, a sound that made Dae-hyun's chest ache. He had been a veterinary student before the war. 2 years into his program, before he enlisted. Old instincts kicked in as he watched the little one struggle. Dae-hyun approached slowly, keeping his movements small and non-threatening. He sat down on the floor about 6 feet away from Kira. He did not speak, did not reach out, just sat there, pulling his small grooming kit from his pocket. He had brought it from Earth. It was a simple thing, meant for dogs and cats. A wire brush, a comb, some detangling spray he had bartered for at the last supply station. He kept it to maintain morale, letting homesick soldiers brush the equipment while they talked about pets they missed. Kira watched him with those huge golden eyes. Her small body tensed, ready to run. Dae-hyun opened the kit slowly. He took out the comb and began running it through his own hair, humming a soft tune his grandmother used to sing. Nothing threatening, just a human doing something calm and repetitive. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Kira's ears slowly lifted from her head. The tension in her small shoulders eased slightly. "That looks uncomfortable," Dae-hyun said quietly, not looking directly at her. He gestured to the mat on her shoulder. "I could help, if you want." Kira tilted her head. She did not understand Korean, of course, but tone was universal. Dae-hyun kept his voice soft and even. He set the comb down between them and slid it slowly across the floor. It stopped, halfway between them. An offering. A choice. Kira stared at the comb for a long moment. Then, moving so slowly, Dae-hyun barely breathed, she crept forward. Her small paw touched the comb. She picked it up, examining it with her sharp little teeth, before looking back at Dae-hyun. "Good," Dae-hyun whispered. "Smart girl." He reached into his kit again and pulled out a piece of dried meat from his rations. Another peace offering. He tossed it gently to her. Kira caught it and ate it quickly, her tail twitching. The next move was hers. Daehyun waited. Slowly, Kira moved closer. She sat down just within arm's reach, her body angled so she could run if needed. But she sat there, watching him, trusting him, just enough. Daehyun reached out very slowly and touched the mat on her shoulder. Kira flinched but did not run. He worked his fingers gently into the tangled fur, feeling for the direction of growth. He had done this hundreds of times with animals at the clinic. The principle was the same. "There we go," he murmured. "Just a little patience." He worked in silence for several minutes, carefully separating the fur strand by strand. Kira remained still, though her breathing was fast. When he finally freed the worst of the tangle, she let out a small chirping sound. Relief. Encouraged, Daehyun continued. He worked through the mats on her back, then along her sides. She was so small, probably no bigger than a large dog by Earth standards. Her fur was beautiful once he got through the tangles, a deep amber color with darker stripes. As he worked, Kira began to relax. It was a deep, rumbling sound that vibrated through her whole body. He smiled and kept working. When he reached the crest of fur along her head, he noticed it kept falling into her eyes. Without thinking too hard about it, he began to braid it. His sister used to make him practice on her hair when they were kids. His fingers remembered the pattern: 3 strands, over and under, pulled back from Kira's face and tied with a small elastic from his kit. Kira's purring grew louder. She leaned into his hands, completely relaxed now. Daehyun felt a warm sense of satisfaction. This was good. This was helping. He did not hear the footsteps behind him until it was too late. "What are you doing?" Daehyun froze. He looked up slowly to find Commander Vexthal standing in the doorway of the rec room. The massive Rakthian's face was unreadable, but his body was rigid. His claws were extended. For a moment, Daehyun was certain he had just made a terrible mistake. Touching an officer's child without permission? That could be a court-martial offense. Or worse, a cultural violation he did not understand. "Sir, Daehyun began, but his voice died. What could he say? Vexthal stepped into the room. His eyes moved from Daehyun to Kira. The little cub looked up at her father and chirped happily, touching the braid in her fur with one small paw. The commander's expression shifted. Something in his eyes softened. He stared at his daughter for a long moment, seeing her peaceful, for the first time, since they arrived at the base. When Vexthal looked back at Daehyun, the human expected anger, orders, punishment. Instead, the commander simply nodded once. A single, slow dip of his massive head. Then he turned and left the room without a word. Daehyun sat there, his heart pounding. Kira curled up against his leg and continued purring. He had no idea what that nod meant. The next morning, Daehyun woke to find 3 Rakthian warriors standing outside his bunk. They stood at perfect attention, their faces serious, their bodies still. They did not speak. They did not move. They just waited. Lieutenant Choi Minji walked past, saw them, and stopped dead. Daehyun? I think you have visitors." Daehyun pulled on his boots and stepped outside. The 3 warriors looked down at him. The closest one, a massive male with scars across his muzzle, spoke carefully, in heavily accented human language. "We request grooming." Daehyun blinked. "You, what?" The warrior gestured to his shoulder, where the fur was matted and clumped. "It is uncomfortable. You helped the commander's cub. We ask for the same service." Behind them, more Rakthian soldiers had stopped to watch. Word had spread fast, apparently. Daehyun looked at the 3 warriors, then at his small grooming kit, then back at the warriors. This was either going to be the strangest morning of his life, or the beginning of something he could not yet understand. He picked up his kit. "Okay. Let me get some coffee first." Then we'll see what we can do. Kamantan. The scarred warrior's tail swished once, almost like happiness. We will wait. The grooming station started as a joke. Private Han Junho found 3 supply crates behind the armory and stacked them to make a seat. He put a tarp over them and called it a barbershop. He even made a sign that said Daehyun's Fur Care with a marker on cardboard. But the joke stopped being funny when the line of Rakthian warriors stretched around the building. Daehyun sat on the makeshift seat with Sergeant Kurthane in front of him. The Rakthian was the oldest warrior in the battalion, with silver scars across his back and a notch missing from one ear. He had fought in more battles than Daehyun had years of life. And now he sat very still, while a human corporal worked a comb through his tangled fur. "Does it hurt?" Daehyun asked, working carefully around a particularly stubborn mat near Kurthan's spine. "No," the Rakthian rumbled. "It is strange to allow another to touch." Daehyun paused. "Should I stop?" "No." Kurthane's tail flicked. "Continue. Continue. Continue. Continue." The base had been different for the past week. The 3 warriors who first asked for grooming had returned to their units with smooth, untangled fur. They moved better, fought better in training exercises, slept better, according to the bunk logs. Other warriors noticed. By day 3, Daehyun had a waiting list. By day 5, he was grooming soldiers during his lunch break, after dinner, and sometimes late into the night. His hands ached. His back hurt from bending over warriors who stood or sat at awkward heights. But he kept going because the results were impossible to ignore. Lieutenant Choi Minji brought him coffee one morning and shook her head. "You know this is insane, right? You're not a barber. You're a rifleman." "I'm helping," Daehyun said simply. "You're doing something nobody else has ever done," Minji corrected. "Do you understand what grooming means to them?" Though, Daehyun looked up from the warrior he was working on. "It means their fur gets untangled?" Minji laughed softly. I asked one of the translators. "In Rakthian culture, grooming is intimate. Parents do it for cubs. Mates do it for each other. Siblings in some cases. But asking an outsider? That means they trust you with something important." Daehyun looked down at his hands, buried in thick purple fur. "They trust me? They trust you," Minji confirmed. That evening, as Daehyun worked on Kurthane's back, the old warrior spoke again. "You do not fear us." It was not a question, but Daehyun answered anyway. "Why would I? You're soldiers like me. We are not like you. We are Rakthian. We are killers." Daehyun paused, his comb halfway through a section of fur. "Everyone here is a killer when they need to be. That's war. But you're also warriors who get itchy when your fur mats, who care about your commander's kid, who stand in line for an hour to get a comb through." He resumed working. Just fluffier than most. Kurthane's shoulders shook. For a terrifying moment, Daehyun thought he had offended the warrior. Then he realized the sound coming from Kurthane was laughter. Deep, rumbling laughter that made the Rakthian's whole body vibrate. Other warriors turned to stare. Kurthane never laughed. Ever. "Fluffier," Kurthane repeated, still chuckling. "Yes, this is accurate." Word about Daehyun's grooming spread beyond the battalion. Soon, warriors from other units began showing up during supply runs, asking if the human could spare time. Daehyun realized he could not do this alone. He approached Private Yoon Hajin first. Hajin had worked at a pet salon before enlisting. "I need help," Daehyun admitted. "There are too many of them." 19. Daehyun. 19:7. Hajin looked at the line of massive alien warriors waiting patiently. "You want me to groom them? I want you to help me teach others to groom them." By the end of the month, Daehyun had trained 4 humans in basic Rakthian fur care. Hajin was a natural. His hands quick and efficient. Corporal Kim Sora was gentle and patient, perfect for the more nervous warriors. Specialist Lee Bora had a gift for the decorative braiding that some Rakthians requested for ceremonies. The change in the Rakthian battalion was dramatic. Performance metrics went up across the board. Reaction times improved. Combat efficiency increased by 12%. The warriors were cooler in the humid climate, more agile without restrictive mats, and noticeably less irritable. Commander Vexthal mentioned none of this directly to Daehyun, but the commander watched. And when little Kira came bounding up to Daehyun in the mess hall one evening, fur shining and braids perfect, Vexthal's expression held something like gratitude. Then the report came. Lieutenant Minji found Daehyun at the grooming station, working through a young warrior's shoulder mats. "We have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The kind that comes from Coalition High Command." Minji handed him a data pad. "Someone sent performance reports up the chain. Now the brass wants to know why a remote outpost suddenly has the most combat-effective Rakthian battalion in the sector." Daehyun scanned the message. "Is that bad?" "It's complicated. General Threshkar is coming here personally to investigate." The name meant nothing to Daehyun. The look on Minji's face meant everything. Who is General Threshkar? Supreme Commander of all Rakthian forces in the Coalition. He's 9 feet tall, covered in silver fur, and older than some Earth nations. He's also incredibly traditional. Minji took the datapad back. If he thinks we're disrespecting his warriors, this becomes a diplomatic incident. The warrior Daehyun had been grooming spoke up in halting human language. "The general will understand. We are not disrespected. We are honored. I hope you're right," Minji said. But she did not sound convinced. Daehyun went back to work, but his hands were less steady now. He had been trying to help. Just trying to make soldiers more comfortable. The idea that it could cause problems between species had never occurred to him. That night, Kurthan found Daehyun sitting alone outside the barracks, staring at the stars. The old warrior sat down beside him. A massive presence in the darkness. "You are worried." "I might have caused trouble," Daehyun admitted. "For you. For everyone." Kurthan was quiet for a long moment. "Among my people, there were once keepers. Those who maintained warriors between battles, who ensured we were fit for combat. The practice was lost long ago, during the Great Scattering. We learned to maintain ourselves, or simply endure discomfort." He looked at Daehyun. "You did not know this. You simply saw warriors in need and offered help. This is not disrespect. This is remembering something we forgot. Will the general see it that way? I do not know. But I know this. My unit fights better because of you." Daehyun nodded slowly. He wanted to believe that. He had to believe that. 3 days later, the alert came. General Threshkar's ship was approaching. The entire base scrambled to prepare. Humans polished equipment. Rakthians stood for inspection. Ambassador Imtayeri arrived from the diplomatic corps, sweating through her dress uniform despite the climate control. Daehyun stood in formation with his unit, watching the massive vessel land. The ramp lowered. And then, General Threshkar emerged. He was enormous. Bigger than any Rakthian Daehyun had seen. His fur was silver white, his eyes a piercing blue. He wore ceremonial armor that marked him as not just a soldier, but a leader of his entire people. His presence made the air feel heavier. Behind him came Captain Nalavex, the general's aide, whose expression suggested he expected to find something very wrong at Forward Base Talon. Ambassador Imtayeri stepped forward, beginning the formal greetings. Daehyun tried to make himself invisible in the ranks. But then Commander Vexthal did something unexpected. He stepped forward and spoke directly to the general. The words were in Rakthian, too fast and complex for the translators to keep up. But Daehyun heard his own name, heard Keeper, heard what sounded like a defense. General Threshkar's eyes swept across the assembled humans and Rakthians. Then, they landed on Daehyun. "You," the general said in perfect human language. "Corporal Park Daehyun. Step forward." Daehyun's heart hammered in his chest. This was it. Either vindication or the end of his military career. He stepped forward and saluted. "Sir." General Threshkar studied him for a long, silent moment. Then he spoke words that would change everything. "Show me what you do." The command center had never felt so small. General Threshkar filled the space like a mountain, his silver fur catching the harsh overhead lights. Every officer on the base watched in silence as Corporal Park Daehyun set up his small grooming kit on a table. His hands shook slightly as he laid out the combs and brushes. Ambassador Im Taeri stood to the side, her face pale. Captain Nalavex watched with narrow eyes, as if waiting for Daehyun to make a mistake. Commander Vexthal stood at attention, his expression unreadable. The tension in the room could be cut with a knife. "Explain your process," General Threshkar commanded, lowering himself to sit on a reinforced chair that groaned under his weight. Daehyun swallowed hard. I start by examining the fur for mats and tangles, sir. Then I work through them carefully, from the ends toward the skin, so I don't cause pain or pull out healthy fur. For warriors in active duty, I focus on functional grooming, areas that might restrict movement or cause overheating. And you learned this where? Veterinary school, sir. Before I enlisted, the principle is similar for any furred creature. Captain Nalvex made a sound that might have been disapproval. You compare Rakthian warriors to animals? Daehyun's mouth went dry. No, sir. I mean, the technique is similar, the biology. But I would never. Enough, Nalvex. General Threshkar's voice cut through the room. The corporal will demonstrate. On me. The room went completely silent. Ambassador Taeri looked like she might faint. Even Commander Vexthal's eyes widened slightly. Daehyun stood frozen. Groom the supreme commander of all Rakthian forces, the most powerful warrior in their entire species? One wrong move, and this became an interstellar incident. Sir, Daehyun managed, I don't want to cause offense. You will cause offense by refusing, Threshkar interrupted. Proceed. There was no choice. Daehyun picked up his widest comb and approached the general. This close, Threshkar was even more massive. His shoulders were broader than some doorways. Scars marked his fur, the kind that spoke of decades of combat. Daehyun took a deep breath and began. He started at the general's shoulders, working slowly and carefully. The silver fur was thick and coarse, matted in places from what looked like armor wear. Daehyun found the patterns of growth and worked with them, not against them. His veterinary training took over, his hands moving with practiced precision. The room remained silent except for the soft sound of the comb moving through fur. Daehyun found a particularly stubborn mat near Threshkar's shoulder blade and worked at it gently, separating strand by strand. He had done this hundreds of times now. The nervousness faded as muscle memory guided him. As he worked lower on the general's back, Daehyun found something unexpected. A scar, old and deep, hidden beneath matted fur. The tissue was thick, and the fur around it had grown incorrectly, creating a painful knot. Daehyun paused. Sir, you have an old wound here. The fur has grown over it wrong. This must be uncomfortable. Threshkar's voice was quieter than before. It is. For many years, I can work around it, make it better. But I need to be very careful. Do what you must. Daehyun spent the next 15 minutes working on that single area. He used the finest comb, his fingers more than his tools, carefully separating the fur and smoothing it in the correct direction. When he finished, the area was flat and neat, not painful, but Daehyun was not done. He had noticed something during his time grooming the warriors. Some of them had requested specific braid patterns that seemed to mean something. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. He had researched them using the base database, finding references to ancient Rakthian military traditions. Ceremonial braids that marked rank, victories, and status. The general wore no such braids. His fur, while clean now, was unmarked. Daehyun made a decision that was either brilliant or career-ending. He began to braid. His fingers worked quickly, creating the pattern he had seen in the oldest files. The Supreme Commander's braid, a complex weave that ran from the crest of the head down the spine. It was functional, keeping fur from armor clasps, but also symbolic, a mark of leadership that dated back centuries. Behind him, someone gasped. Daehyun did not stop. He finished the braid and tied it with a small clasp from his kit. "Done, sir." General Threshkar stood slowly. He moved to a reflective panel on the wall, examining himself. His massive hand reached back, touching the braid. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he turned to face the room. His blue eyes swept across the assembled officers, both human and Rakthian. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of authority that had commanded armies. "This human has honored my form. He has not diminished a warrior. He has maintained one." Threshkar looked directly at Daehyun. "You know the old patterns." "How?" "I researched, sir. I wanted to do this right. Your warriors deserve respect." Something in the general's expression shifted. When he spoke again, his voice held a quality Daehyun had not heard before. Almost wonder. "You have revived something we lost, Corporal Park Daehyun. In the ancient days, before the Great Scattering, our warriors had keepers. Those who maintained our combat readiness between battles, who ensured our fur did not hinder us, who understood that caring for a warrior's form was as important as sharpening their claws." He paused. "The practice ended during the war generations. We lost the keepers and learned to endure discomfort as a mark of strength. But this was not strength. It was simply loss." Captain Nalevik stepped forward. "General, surely we cannot ignore effectiveness." Threshkar cut him off. "I have read the reports. This battalion performs better than units twice its size. Combat readiness is up. Injuries are down. Cohesion is at levels we have not seen in decades. Why?" He gestured to Daehyun. "Because one human saw warriors in discomfort and offered help. Without agenda. Without expectation of reward. Simply because it was needed." Ambassador Terry found her voice. "General Threshkar, what are you suggesting?" "I am suggesting that we have forgotten something important about being warriors. That strength and care are not opposites. That accepting help does not diminish us." Threshkar placed a massive paw on Daehyun's shoulder. The weight was significant, but not crushing. "This human honors Rakthian warriors. I propose we honor him in return." Commander Vexthal spoke up. "How, General?" Threshkar smiled, showing teeth that could tear through armor. "I want human grooming specialists assigned to all Rakthian units across the coalition. Not as servants, not as subordinates, as keepers. A role of respect and trust." The room erupted in murmurs. Captain Nalvex looked shocked. Ambassador Thierry pulled out her communicator, probably to contact Coalition Command. The human officers exchanged confused glances. Daehyun just stood there, his grooming kit still in his hand, trying to process what had just happened. General Threshkar turned to him. "You will train others in this work?" Yes, sir. I've already started. We have 5 humans who know the basics. Make it 50. Then, 500. This will be formal, official. Humans who serve as keepers will hold special rank within Rakthian units. They will be protected as valuable assets. They will be honored as maintainers of warrior strength. Lieutenant Choi Minji stepped forward. "Sir, with respect, this is a massive cultural shift. For both our species." "Yes," Threshkar agreed. "It is. But I have lived long enough to recognize when something is right, even if it is unexpected. Your people have a gift for connection that we have lost. You see warriors and think first of their well-being, not just their combat effectiveness. This makes you better allies than we knew." He addressed the room at large. his voice carrying command weight. "Spread the word. Rakthian units will begin requesting human keeper assignments immediately. This is not optional. This is doctrine. We adapt or we stagnate." As the meeting dissolved into logistics discussions, Daehyun found himself surrounded by Rakthian warriors from the base battalion. Kurthane approached first, placing a clawed hand over his heart in a gesture Daehyun had learned meant deep respect. "You have given us back something we did not know we missed, Keeper." The title felt strange. But looking around at the warriors, strong, fierce, deadly, who stood straighter and moved easier because of simple care, Daehyun felt something settle in his chest. This was right. This was good. Little Kira pushed through the crowd of adults, her braided fur bouncing as she ran to Daehyun. She chirped happily and headbutted his leg, her version of a hug. Behind her, Commander Vexthal watched with what might have been the closest thing to a smile Daehyun had ever seen on the stern warrior's face. "What happens now?" Daehyun asked Minji. She shook her head, but she was grinning. "Now? Now you accidentally changed the galaxy. No pressure." 3 months after General Threshkar's visit, the Morale and Maintenance Corps was official. Major Baek Jiwon, a former therapist who had retrained as a combat medic, led the newly formed unit. Unofficially, every soldier in the galaxy called them the Grooming Corps. The name stuck, despite official protests. Daehyun found himself training new recruits constantly. The coalition fast-tracked volunteers who had experience with animals or hair care. Private Nam Unji arrived from a transport ship looking nervous and overwhelmed. She was small, even by human standards, barely meeting the height requirement for military service. "I worked at a dog grooming salon for 5 years, she explained during her first day. "No," Daehyun agreed, watching a Rakthian warrior walk past who stood over 8 feet tall. "They are definitely not dogs. But the principles are similar. Be gentle. Be patient. Let them know they are safe." Yoonji nodded, her hands fidgeting with her new grooming kit. "What if I mess up?" "You will mess up. Everyone does at first. The warriors know this. They are patient." Daehyun smiled. "More patient than you would think, considering they can break steel with their bare hands." By the end of her first week, Unji had discovered something unexpected. She had a gift for calming warriors who returned from combat with what the medical staff called battle shock. These Rakthians were jumpy, aggressive, unable to settle. Standard therapy helped, but grooming sessions with Unji seemed to work miracles. She would sit with them in quiet rooms, working through their fur with slow, steady movements, while humming softly. The warriors would gradually relax, their breathing evening out, their claws retracting. Some of them talked during these sessions, speaking of things they could not say to their commanders or even their mates. "She has a healer's touch," Commander Vexthal observed one day, watching Unji work with a young warrior who had been in 3 firefights in 2 weeks. "Different from yours, Keeper Daehyun, but valuable." The grooming corps expanded rapidly. Within months, over 200 humans served across coalition space as keepers. They became part of the Rakthian units in ways that surprised everyone. Humans sat in on tactical planning sessions, their insights valued. Warriors sought them out, not just for grooming but for conversation, for perspective, for the simple comfort of their presence. The humans learned Rakthian culture deeply. They learned the meaning of different braid patterns. They learned battle songs and mourning rituals. They learned which warriors liked to talk during grooming and which preferred silence. In turn, the Rakthians learned about humanity. They discovered that humans formed bonds across species naturally, that humans considered caring for others a strength, not a weakness, that humans could be fierce in battle and gentle in peace without contradiction. Then the alert came from Cronus Station. The Void Swarm, the enemy that had been harassing coalition borders for years, launched a massive assault. 300 enemy ships against Cronus Station's defense force of 70. The station was a critical supply hub. If it fell, it would open a path deep into coalition space. Every available unit was ordered to Cronus for defense. That included Forward Base Talon's joint human-Racthian force. The transport ships were cramped and tense during the 3-day journey. Warriors checked weapons and armor. Human soldiers ran combat drills. The keepers moved through both groups, offering what comfort they could. Daehyun found himself in the cargo bay the night before arrival, unable to sleep. Private Han Junho sat nearby, cleaning his rifle for the 4th time. "You scared?" Junho asked. "Terrified," Daehyun admitted. "You?" "Same." Junho set down his rifle. "But at least we are going with them, you know? With warriors who trust us. That counts for something." Well. The next morning, as the fleet approached Cronus Station, alarms began to wail. The Void Swarm was already there. The enemy ships were organic nightmares, living vessels that looked like they had been grown rather than built. They swarmed around the station like insects, firing bioweapons that ate through hull plating. The station's defenses were holding but barely. Commander Vexthal gathered the battalion in the hangar bay. "We deploy in 10 minutes. Our objective is to board the station and reinforce the defense points on levels 7 through 12. Expect heavy combat. Expect casualties." His glowing eyes swept across human and Racthian alike. Fight as one pride. Protect each other. Survive. But before anyone could move to their deployment positions, something unexpected happened. Keeper Yunji stepped forward with her grooming kit. Behind her, 10 other human keepers did the same. "Warriors," she said quietly. "We have time for combat braids." It was not a request. It was not an order. It was simply an offer. For a moment, no one moved. Then Sergeant Kurthane, the old scarred veteran, knelt in front of Yunji. "Please. Keeper." The dam broke. Warriors lined up quickly, efficiently. The keepers moved through them with practiced speed, creating the tight, functional braids that kept fur from getting caught in armor or weapons. The braids that kept hair from eyes during combat. The braids that marked them as warriors, maintained by keepers. Warriors who were valued beyond their ability to kill. Daehyun worked on Commander Vexthal personally. His hands were steady despite the fear churning in his gut. He had done this braid pattern 100 times. His fingers knew the way. "Thank you, Keeper," Vexthal said quietly when Daehyun finished. "Come back alive," Daehyun replied. "All of you. We will try." The deployment was chaos. The Void Swarm had breached 3 sections of the station. The Racthian warriors tore through enemy forces with terrifying efficiency, their improved mobility and comfort making them even more deadly. The human soldiers provided covering fire and tactical support, their understanding of Racthian combat patterns allowing for seamless coordination. Daehyun was not supposed to be in combat. Keepers were supposed to stay on the ships, safe and ready to provide care when the warriors returned. But when a breach opened near the medical bay where the keepers were stationed, there was no choice. He grabbed his rifle and fell in with Private Junho and Corporal Kim Sora. The 3 of them held a corridor against Void Swarm drones, skittering organic machines that leaked acid and screamed with voices that sounded almost human. Daehyun's hands remembered his combat training. Aim, fire, move, reload, repeat. Beside him, Sora's rifle barked steadily. Junho threw grenades that exploded in bursts of fire. Then, Daehyun's position was overrun. 3 drones came from a side corridor he had not been watching. He turned too late. One of them leaped, claws extended, mandibles open. It never reached him. Sergeant Kurthane crashed into the drones like a living avalanche. Behind him came 5 more Racthian warriors, roaring with voices that shook the walls. They tore through the enemy with claws and teeth and pure fury. Kurthane grabbed Daehyun by the shoulders, checking him for injuries. "You are hurt?" No, I'm fine." "What are you doing here?" "Your position was 3 levels up. We heard the keepers were in danger." Kurthane's expression was fierce. No one touches our keepers. No. The cry was taken up by other warriors in the corridor. No one touches our keepers. It became a battle cry, spreading through the Rakthian forces. Warriors fought harder, pushed deeper, protected the humans among them with the same ferocity they would show for cubs. The battle lasted 14 hours. When it finally ended, the Void Swarm retreated, their forces broken. The cost was heavy: 37 coalition soldiers dead, over 100 wounded. But without the joint human-Rakthian defense, the station would have fallen. Dae-Hyun woke in the medical bay with no memory of getting there. His body ached. His hands were bandaged. Lieutenant Choi Min-ji sat beside his bed, looking exhausted. "You passed out from exhaustion," she explained. "You and the other keepers have been working non-stop on wounded warriors for 10 hours. The battalion? Bruised, battered, but mostly intact. Kurthane has a broken arm. Vexthal took shrapnel to the shoulder. But everyone who went down came back up." Dae-Hyun tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Everything hurt. But through the door of the medical bay, he could see into the corridor beyond. The entire Rakthian battalion stood there. They lined the walls, filled the hallway, stood at attention. They were not waiting for orders. They were not preparing for deployment. They were standing vigil. For him, for the keepers. "They have been there since you collapsed," Min-ji said softly. "It is apparently a traditional honor for fallen keepers, except you are not fallen, so they are just waiting until you wake." Dae-Hyun looked at the massive warriors standing guard. Warriors he had groomed, cared for, served alongside. Who now protected him with the same loyalty they showed their own families. "We really did change something, didn't we?" he whispered. Min-ji smiled. "You have no idea." 6 months after the Battle of Cronus Station, High Counselor Rin Shara arrived at Forward Base Talon. She was ancient even by Rakthian standards, her fur a pale cream color that spoke of many decades. She moved slowly but with dignity, and when she spoke, even General Threshkar listened. She had come with a proposal that would change the relationship between humans and Rakthians forever. The meeting took place in the largest conference room on the base. Dae-Hyun sat with the other keepers, feeling out of place among the military brass and diplomatic officials. Ambassador Im Taeri looked nervous. General Threshkar stood beside Rin Shara, his expression unreadable. "I speak for the Council of Elders," Rin Shara began, her voice clear despite her age. "We have watched the integration of human keepers into our warrior units. We have seen the results, not just in combat effectiveness, but in the bonds formed between our species." She paused, letting her words settle. "We propose a pride bond, a formal cultural adoption of humanity into Rakthian society. It has been done only twice in our history, both times with species that no longer exist. It is not offered lightly." The room erupted in murmurs. Captain Oh Sung-wan, a human officer who had initially thought grooming was beneath military dignity, spoke up. "What does a pride bond mean, exactly?" "It means humans and Rakthians become one pride," Threshkar explained. "Not politically, not militarily, but culturally, spiritually. Our cubs would learn human customs. Your children would learn ours. We would share knowledge, traditions, and protection as family, not just allies. That is," Ambassador Terry searched for words. "That is unprecedented." "Yes," Rin Shara agreed. "But then, everything about this situation is unprecedented." A human soldier saw a frightened cub and offered comfort. From that single act, we have rediscovered a lost part of ourselves. We have learned that strength comes in forms we had forgotten, and we have found partners who see warriors and still offer gentleness. She looked directly at Dae-Hyun. "This is worth honoring," but not everyone agreed. Some humans resisted. Captain Oh Sung-wan stood again, his face flushed. With respect, counselor. This feels like we are diminishing ourselves. We are soldiers, equals, not servants who groom and coddle. Is that what you think keepers do? Sergeant Curthane's voice cut through the room. The old warrior stood, his scarred form imposing even in the formal setting. Coddle us? Coddle us. I did not mean offense. Oh, Sungwon said. But his voice was defensive. Then let me explain what keepers do. Kurthan's eyes swept the room. They see warriors returning from combat, shaking with battle shock, and they sit with us until we can breathe again. They notice when our equipment causes pain and fix it before we lose mobility. They remember which warriors prefer silence and which need conversation. They maintain our combat readiness, not through force, but through care. He looked at Oh Sungwon directly. If you see this as weakness or servitude, then you understand nothing about strength. Commander Vexthal stood as well. Before the keepers, I watched my warriors suffer in silence. I watched them hide pain, because we believed endurance was the only path. Now I watch them fight better, live better, and trust deeper. Because humans showed us that accepting help is not surrender. It is wisdom. Private Yoon Hajin raised his hand hesitantly. I have a question. For the counselor. Why now? Why make this offer now? Rinshara smiled. A slight curve of her mouth that showed teeth. Because we are not fools. We see how other species watch the human-Rakthian partnerships. They want the same. The Velkari have requested human diplomatic liaisons. The Methrin want human cultural advisors. Humanity has a gift for connection that the galaxy needs. But you chose to serve us first. You chose to understand us, honor us, care for us. That loyalty deserves recognition. She moved to the center of the room. There will be a ceremony on Rakthia Prime in 1 month. If humanity accepts the Pride Bond, a representative must participate. The ceremony is sacred. It is binding. And it will change both our species forever. The debate lasted 3 days. Humans argued among themselves. Some saw it as a great honor. Others feared losing their identity or becoming subordinate. The keepers, almost universally, wanted to accept. It is not about being above or below, Private Nam Unji said during one heated discussion. It is about being together. Family. 2. Finally, a vote was called. The Human Coalition leadership agreed. They would accept the Pride Bond, and Corporal Park Daehyun would represent humanity at the ceremony. Daehyun spent the 3 weeks before the ceremony learning Rakthian ritual protocols with Rinshara herself. The old counselor was patient, but exacting. You will speak for your entire species, she reminded him. Every word matters. Every gesture. Understand? I understand, Daehyun said, but his hands shook slightly. The journey to Rakthia Prime took 5 days. When they arrived, Daehyun saw the Rakthian homeworld for the first time. It was beautiful. Vast forests, towering mountains, cities that blended with nature rather than dominating it. And everywhere, Rakthians stopped to stare at the humans walking among them. The ceremony took place beneath twin moons, in an ancient grove that had witnessed pride bonds for thousands of years. Massive trees surrounded a clearing where hundreds of Rakthians gathered. General Threshkar stood to one side. Commander Vexthal was there with little Kira, now grown into a young adolescent with perfect braids in her fur. Daehyun walked to the center of the clearing, his dress uniform pressed and clean. Rinshara met him there, carrying a ceremonial blade. We begin, she announced to the assembled crowd. Her voice carried across the clearing. A pride bond is offered to humanity. A bond of shared strength, shared protection, and shared life. But before it is sealed, questions must be asked and answered. She turned to Daehyun. Human, why do you honor our fur? Daehyun had practiced this answer 100 times. But in the moment, with hundreds of eyes watching, he forgot the formal words. Instead, he spoke from his heart, because it is part of you. And you are worth caring for. All of you. Every warrior, every elder, every cub. You fight hard. You protect others. You deserve to be protected too, to be comfortable, to be valued for more than your ability to destroy. He paused. My people see that. We see you. And we want to help. Not because you are weak, but because everyone, no matter how strong, sometimes needs help. Rinshara nodded slowly. She turned to the gathered Rakthians. Warriors, why do you accept human hands? Commander Vexthal stepped forward. Because they touch without conquest. They strengthen without domination. They see warriors, and still offer gentleness. We have learned from them that true strength includes knowing when to accept care. That bonds built on trust are stronger than bonds built on fear. He placed his hand over his heart. They are not servants. They are not subordinates. They are pride. A rumble of agreement moved through the crowd. Deep voices. Speaking as one, Rinshara raised the ceremonial blade. Then, let it be sealed. Corporal Park Daehyun, representative of humanity, extend your hand. Daehyun did. His hand looked small compared to the Rakthian paws surrounding him. Rinshara took a single hair from Daehyun's head. He barely felt it. And then cut a small tuft of fur from her own arm. With swift, practiced movements, she braided them together. Human hair and Rakthian fur wound into one strand. What was separate becomes one. What was other becomes pride. From this moment forward, humans and Rakthians share bonds that cannot be broken by distance or time. We are one pride, one family, one strength. The clearing erupted in a roar. Not of aggression, but of joy. Hundreds of Rakthian voices raised together, a sound that shook the trees. Human soldiers in attendance cheered. Some cried. Private Yunji hugged Keeper Lee Bora. Lieutenant Choi Minji saluted, tears streaming down her face. Little Kira broke from the crowd and ran to Daehyun, nearly knocking him over. She was bigger now, almost adult-sized, but she still chirped like a cub and headbutted him affectionately. Behind her, Vexthal approached more slowly. Thank you, Keeper, the commander said, for seeing my daughter when she needed help, for starting all of this. I just braided her fur, Daehyun said, his voice thick with emotion. You did much more than that. Vexthal placed a heavy paw on Daehyun's shoulder. You reminded us how to be whole. The celebration lasted 3 days. Humans and Rakthians mingled freely, sharing food and stories. Young Rakthians practiced their human language skills on patient soldiers. Human children, visiting with diplomatic families, were taught Rakthian games by warriors who were terrifyingly gentle with the small ones. On the final night, as the twin moons rose over the grove, Rinshara found Daehyun sitting alone, watching the festivities. Overwhelmed, young keeper? A bit, Daehyun admitted. A year ago, I was just trying to help a scared kid. Now, I am apparently part of an interspecies cultural revolution. Rinshara laughed, a sound like wind chimes. One moment of seeing another's need and choosing to help. She sat beside him, her old bones creaking slightly. You know what will come next? What? What? Other species will want what we have. The trust. The bond. Humanity will become the bridge builders of the galaxy. The species that connects others. She smiled. Your people's true strength was never your weapons or your tactics. It was always your hearts. Your ability to look at something different and see value. To offer care without expectation of reward. We are just trying to help, Daehyun said. Exactly. Rinshara stood slowly. Keep doing that. The galaxy needs it more than you know. 5 years later, Major Park Dae-hun oversaw the keeper training program at Forward Base Talon. The small grooming station had become a full facility. Over 2,000 humans now served as keepers across Coalition space, not just with Rakthians but with 5 other species who had requested similar programs. Private Jang Minho, fresh from basic training, arrived for his first day. He looked nervous as Dae-hyun showed him the equipment. "Is it true?" Minho asked. "That you started all this by braiding a cub's fur?" "It is true," Dae-hyun confirmed. "But I did not start anything. I just helped one kid who needed it. Everything else grew from there." The door to the facility opened. Kira entered, now a fully grown warrior with scars from her first combat deployment. Behind her walked a small cub, no more than 5 years old, with tangled fur and wide, frightened eyes. "Keeper Dae-hyun," Kira said formally. "This is my daughter, Sina. She has just arrived from the evacuation of the outer colonies. Her fur," Kira gestured helplessly. "She needs help." Dae-hyun smiled and knelt down to the cub's level. "Hello, Sina. My name is Dae-hyun. Would you like me to help with your fur?" The little one looked at her mother. Kira nodded encouragingly. Sina turned back to Dae-hyun and took a small step forward. "It itches," she said in careful human language. "I can fix that," Dae-hyun promised. He looked up at Minho. "Watch carefully. This is where it all begins. One braid. One moment of care. One warrior at a time." As he worked through the cub's tangled fur, humming softly, Dae-hyun thought about how far they had all come. From one frightened child to a galaxy-spanning alliance. From simple grooming to cultural revolution. And it had all started with seeing someone who needed help and choosing to offer it. The galaxy had changed. And it had changed because one human saw a cub in distress and thought, "I can fix that." Sometimes the biggest changes started with the smallest acts of kindness. Sometimes saving the galaxy meant braiding a child's fur and making them smile. And sometimes, just sometimes, that was enough.